in listening to that. That does it for today's Washington Journal. The House is in session. Likely on the floor is an FAA bill for funding of that legislation. Thanks for watching.
The House will be in order. The Chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., January 24, 2012. I hereby appoint the Honorable Eric Paulson to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 17, 2012, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with each party limited to 1 hour and each member, other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip, limited to 5 minutes each, but in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Jones, for 5 minutes. The gentleman will suspend. The Chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I have been directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has agreed to H.Con. Res. 96, providing for a joint session of Congress to receive a message from the President.
The gentleman from North Carolina may resume.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. On January 12th, CBS Evening News did a segment on just how impossible is the situation in Afghanistan. This is something I've been speaking out for months and months and months, and I think CBS beautifully illustrated just how dire of a situation it is in Afghanistan. I will read excerpts from the report containing examples of just how inept the Afghan Army is. And I quote, CBS News correspondent Clarissa Ward found one reason in the Pesh Valley Americans lost their lives there building a base called Nangalam. When they tried to hand over their gains to the Afghan Army, the base went to ruin. Army Major Gideon from Southern California is frustrated. You're relying on us to do all your security for you. You need to be participating, Gillum told an Afghan counterpart. On a recent patrol, some Afghan soldiers were not wearing helmets. One chatted on his cell phone. The United States military left Nangalam base last February, handing over to Afghan forces, but within weeks things went badly wrong. Remember, Mr. Speaker, this is a CBS national report. Enemy forces returned to roam freely through the valley. The Afghan commander deserted. Hundreds of his soldiers followed. The Afghan forces that remained ransacked their own base. All the electric wires have been pulled out. Anything of any value was taken. You can see the wire hanging out of the lights. Mr. Speaker, a new Afghan Army unit has been brought in with a new commander called Colonel Tarab. U.S. officers have nicknamed him Honest Abe. And he was honest to a fault about the prospects of the Afghan Army. Mr. Speaker, listen very carefully. It would take about 30 years for the Afghan Army to be ready, Tarab said through a translator. And if they are going to reform and the corruption is removed, it will take about 10 years. How many $10 billion a month do we have to spend? How many young men and women have to die for a failed policy? And history has proven you will never change Afghanistan, no matter what you do. This poster beside me is a wife in tears whose husband was killed in Afghanistan. And the little girl, as you can see, Mr. Speaker, is looking at the flag. She has no idea that her daddy is dead. She will know one day that our father died to prop up a corrupt leader named Karzai and a corrupt government. And then she will learn from the history books as she gets into high school that no nation has ever conquered Afghanistan, and no nation will ever conquer Afghanistan. As we listen to the President tonight and he talks about the state of affairs, I hope he will mention that he intends to bring our troops home now, not in 2014. In 2014, I do not know how many young men and women have to lose their legs, their arms, and die. So I hope both parties will come together this spring and talk about bringing our troops home now, not 2014. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I will ask God to please bless our men and women in uniform and their families, to bless the families who have given a child dying for freedom in Afghanistan and Iraq, and ask God to please continue to bless America. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Ms. Pelosi, for 5 minutes.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection. Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to pay tribute to the life, leadership, and legacy of our former colleague and a friend of many in this House, Congressman Eddie Jenkins. My colleague, John Lewis, has brought many of us together either on this floor or in our other public statements to say what an honor it was to serve with Eddie Jenkins, how much we all learned from him, the humor as well as the intellect that he brought to his work was definitely an asset to the work of the Congress. Eddie Jenkins was a proud son of Georgia. If you heard him say it, you would agree, a self-described country lawyer from Jasper, a public servant dedicated to his constituents, to advancing the interests, hopes, and aspirations of his neighbors down there in Georgia, and to securing future prosperity for all and opportunity for all Americans. It must be a true honor for Congressman Jenkins and his family that this tribute has been organized and led by the conscience of the Congress, a man of extraordinary leadership and character, and a fellow representative from the state of Georgia, Congressman John Lewis. Congressman Jenkins will long be remembered as a leader willing to work across the aisle, negotiate and build coalitions on behalf of the greater good. He will be remembered in textile mills across the South as a champion of the industry, a defender of good-paying jobs for local workers in small towns and communities across the region, for small businesses. He will be remembered as a champion of the Ways and Means Committee for his expertise on the tax code, for his wisdom and leadership with respect, the respect he earned even when his colleagues disagreed with him. And he will be remembered for his legendary tough questioning during the Iran-Contra hearings, a scene that reflected and embodied the strong-willed, deep character and core principles, his pursuit of the truth, his commitment to transparency and accountability, his firm belief in the sanctity of the rule of law. The Congressman Jenkins served his community in our country as a lawyer, as a congressional staffer, in the Coast Guard, and as a member of the House of Representatives. He'll be missed by his friends in Congress, by his friends he served in Georgia, by his neighbors and loved ones. We only hope that it is some comfort to his wife of 51 years, Jo, his daughters Janice and Amy, his brothers, sisters, grandsons, and his entire family, that so many share their grief at this sad time. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins, for a life of service to the country and to the Congress. Thank you, Mr. Lewis, for providing this opportunity for us to honor a person we were proud to call colleague and friend. With that, I yield back the balance.
The gentlewoman yields back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Ms. Schmidt, for 5 minutes.
Permission to speak for 5 minutes and to invite and extend my remarks.
Without objection. Gentleman was recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, today I really just want to say thank you to a young woman who, for the last time in her legislative career as a member of Congress, will grace our presence this evening at the State of the Union. And I'm talking about my good friend, Gabby Giffords. I think the world will all know Gabby as the courageous heroine who on January the 8th, 2011, was met by an unbelievable mad person who changed her life and the life of so many. But I really want to tell all of us in this body what a great individual and a humanitarian she was for all of us. She was sworn into office on January the 4th, 2007. She came out of the state legislature in Arizona, so her background was in the state legislature, as mine is. She currently represents southern Arizona, Tucson area, which has the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base and the Fort Hutchinson in Sierra Vista. She is a leading champion on border security, energy independence, and the needs of military families and veterans, which she knows so well because she is married to an active military veteran, Mark Kelly, who not only flew umpteen missions as a naval pilot, but also flew into space as a NASA astronaut. On January the 8th, when she was having coffee, Congress on Your Corner at a supermarket in northwest Tucson, an ordinary morning, and many people were there, she was met by a madman who not only changed her life, but ended the life of 9-year-old Christina Taylor Greene, Dorothy Morris, John Roll, the chief federal judge for Arizona, Phyllis Schneck, Dorwin Stoddard, and Zimmerman. 12 others, including Gifford's staff members Ron Barber and Pat Simon, were wounded. She was treated initially nearby and then flown to the TIRR Memorial Hermann Rehabilitation Hospital in Houston. She continues to be rehabilitated, and it is remarkable how far this young woman has come. She was a Fulbright scholar, but more importantly, she is my friend. See, in the House, we have a little bipartisan softball team. We play folks like the NRCC young folks and the DCCC young folks, and now recently we're playing the press corps. And she was a member of our team, and she was a really good member. I wish Gabby well as she moves to a new direction in her life, and I pray each and every morning and each and every evening that God will continue to allow her to become a complete human being again. She is a great lady, a great friend to this House, a great friend to the folks in Tucson and surrounding Arizona. And yes, I will yield to my friend, Mr. Elliott from New York.
I thank the gentlewoman for yielding to me, and I think that her taking the floor this morning is the best example of bipartisanship that people say Congress doesn't have enough of, and I think that those of us that believe in bipartisanship need to do more and more of this. The attack on Gabby was really an attack on all of us, an attack on Congress, and something that's really just unthinkable. And I'm very happy that she will be here this evening for the State of the Union address by the President. I got to know Gabby very well because my son attended the University of Arizona in Tucson and graduated from there, and he was campaigning for her, and I actually got to know her before she even was a member of the House. And I think that all of us can say that she has been one of the most collegial, friendly, hardworking, dedicated members of Congress. We go out there, all of us, on both sides of the aisle every day and meet with thousands and thousands and thousands of constituents. I think that she embodied the best of what Congress has to offer, and I am sorry that she is resigning, but I know that she's doing what she feels is best for her state of Arizona and also best for her, and I know that we all wish her Godspeed, and we all wish her a speedier recovery as we can get. And I know we haven't seen the last of her. She will come roaring back and will continue to make tremendous contributions to this country for years to come. So I want to thank the gentlewoman for doing this. I think that both of us standing here today shows the American people that Congress can work together, should work together, and in the fine tradition of Gabby Giffords, we're going to make sure that we all continue to work together. Thank you.
On that note, I yield back my time. Thank you.
Time of the gentlewoman has expired. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Quigley, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, Chicago is a city of many treasures. From the architecture to the museums and cultural institutions, from the sports teams to our food, there are many, many reasons to celebrate the Windy City. But with so much to do, see, and eat, some of our city's finest features do not make it onto most tourists' to-do list. But if you want to share with the visitors some of the true heart and soul of Chicago, drive down Lakeshore Drive with the lake on one side and our beautiful skyline on the other, and 93 WXRT on the radio. I have tried to explain to my children about the vast wasteland that was music radio in Chicago before XRT. 40 years ago, all you had was the same 10 songs on AM radio. Then came XRT with a rich, diverse playlist, with a passion and an integrity unmatched even today. No coincidence it became a 24-hour station in 1976, demonstrating our city's unique commitment to independent thinking and an unbridled celebration of art and music. Like many others, XRT linked me to a new world. XRT encouraged me to leave my sterile environment and travel to the Earl of Old Town to listen to Steve Goodman, and my first concert at the Aragon Ballroom to see Mott the Hoople and the New York Dolls, not to mention other famous haunts that played host to greats like Iggy Pop, David Bowie, Muddy Waters, Frank Zappa, Roxy Music, and the like. Thank you, XRT, for 40 great years. You made me a better person. And when your kids turn their dial to 93, they will find Lynn Bramer, your best friend in the whole world. Lynn has been the morning voice at XRT for the last 20 years, and it's a Chicago institution unto himself. For 20 years, Lynn has been there with us to celebrate all things Chicago, from commiserating another Chicago Cubs loss to suggesting the perfect restaurant for a post-concert dinner. He shares with us the best of the city and makes sure we better understand the world with Lynn's Bin. He helps us discover new sounds, rediscover old favorites, and provides an unparalleled soundtrack to our days. A celebrated fixture in radio, Lynn has received a variety of honors throughout his illustrious career. In 1990, he was honored as Music Director of the Decade by Heart Report. Lynn's musical sensibilities are nicely summed up by his motto, borrowed from the writing of Gerald Manley Hopkins. Flesh fade and mortal trash fall to the residuary worm. You and I might as well rock and roll. Dubbed the Reverend of Rock and Roll, early in his radio career, Lynn sought to put together a radio program unlike any other. Now, more than 35 years since he first hosted a radio show in Albany, New York, Lynn has succeeded in doing that and so much more. Radio isn't Lynn's only passion. He is also quite the accomplished foodie, never going anywhere without a food guide in his car and his self-described eating pants, an outfit with enough give to accommodate another Chicago meal, the Wiener Circle. His favorite restaurants in Chicago include a wide variety of cuisine for an even broader array of occasions. His recommendations have included best upscale Mexican restaurant for when you want to leave the kids at home, or the very specific best late-night steak burrito. I'm sure he also enjoys splitting a cinnamon roll with our friend and his colleague Terry Hemritt, another Chicago jewel, at her favorite table at Ann Sather's restaurant on Belmont. Lynn Bramer is a man who helps us discover the best about Chicago, and in doing so has become a Chicago treasure himself. We appreciate and applaud his career as one of our city's finest radio personalities and most recognizable voices, and look forward to the music, experiences, and food he will help us discover in his next 20 years. Thank you, Lynn, for always reminding us why it's great to be alive. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Dold, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know, and just listening to some of the comments, that I'm joined by, I think, all of my colleagues in welcoming Gabby Giffords back to this body for this evening's State of the Union address. And certainly our thoughts and prayers are with her for a full and speedy recovery as she continues to make strides. Mr. Speaker, this past month I've had the opportunity, as many of my colleagues have, to travel throughout our districts. And as the #1 manufacturing district in our country, it's no surprise that people are frustrated and concerned about jobs in the economy. I know that's common because when I talk to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and my colleagues over on this side of the aisle about the #1 issue we face, they also say it's jobs in the economy. So whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, I think we can all come together
and agree that we need to find the common ground to spur economic growth. It's time that we work together in a bipartisan way to pass legislation that empowers job creators and puts America back to work. I firmly believe that if we put people before politics and progress before partisanship and find common ground, we will move our country forward. If you have an idea that is going to move our country forward, I think that we ought to vote on it and move it forward immediately. Mr. Speaker, today marks the 1,000th day that the United States Senate has not passed a budget. As someone that runs a small business before coming to Washington, sitting around kitchen tables, Americans are wondering how they tighten their belt, how they balance their budget. But the point there is that they have a budget. Small businesses all across the land can't operate without a budget. Big businesses can't operate without a budget. American families generally can't operate without a budget. And yet we here in Washington have not had a budget in far, far, far too long. You could build the Empire State Building 2.5 times in the time that it's taken the Senate to even pass their version of a budget. This is just plainly unacceptable for the American public. Put something forward. Let us know where we should be putting our priorities. And that, unfortunately, creates an enormous inefficiency. Can you imagine trying to figure out where you're supposed to spend your resources, what you're supposed to spend your money on in terms of trying to move your family forward without a budget? There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty, Mr. Speaker, out there, and I hear it from people each and every day. Uncertainty that Washington is creating. Excessive regulations. There's no question about that. We look at Dodd-Frank, and Dodd-Frank, frankly, we've got 400 rules and regulation, over 200 some odd that have yet to even be written. What it does is it paralyzes small businesses. People are sitting on their hands. They're not moving forward. They're not hiring people. This is something that we here in this body have an opportunity to change. We can provide that level of certainty, and I think that we must. We're going to hear a lot about a do-nothing Congress, and frankly, I get frustrated when I hear about that. This body has passed over 30 jobs bills and sent them across the courtyard to the other side of the Capitol, where they sit on Harry Reid's doorstep. Now, these aren't partisan bills, Mr. Speaker. These are bills like access to capital for job creators that passed this body by over 400 votes. That's wildly bipartisan, something that we agree upon. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle, my colleagues on this side of the aisle. And yet they're sitting on Harry Reid's doorstep and they won't even come up for a vote. This is the frustration that I think the American public has. Washington needs to move forward. We need to address jobs in the economy. We need to address the out-of-control spending that has happened, yes, on both sides of the aisle. We need to figure out a way that Washington can tighten its belt so that we do not burying our children and grandchildren under a mountain of debt and jeopardizing the very fabric of the American dream. Mr. Speaker, I talk to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and I do sense that there is a frustration, there is a concern that we may be the first generation of Americans that leaves our country worse for our children and grandchildren than we received from our parents and grandparents. For me, this is absolutely unacceptable, which is why I think that we have to find that common ground. Find the common ground and move our country forward. I certainly hope tonight we talk about a united America. We talk about a vision that unites us as opposed to one that divides us. This will be an opportunity, and I hope it's about jobs in the economy, the out-of-control spending, and making sure that hardworking American taxpayers are moving forward. This is our time. It's time we all come together and put America back to work. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Alabama, Ms. Sewell, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to recognize Sally White, a remarkable young lady from the 7th Congressional District of Alabama, who was a recent recipient of the Congressional Gold Medal of Service for Youth Award. Sally is a driven and committed and determined young lady who is destined for success. She's currently a senior at Thomasville High School in Thomasville, Alabama, and has a 4.32 grade point average. She's been a member of the varsity cheerleading squad for 3 years and was captain of the squad this year. She was also named a Universal Cheerleaders Association All-American. Sally has been involved in the Thespian Drama Honor Society for 6 years and attended the International Thespian Festival in Nebraska, where she worked with theater students from around the world. She's a member of the National Honor Society, attended Alabama's Girls State, and is a Thomasville Chamber ambassador. Sally has been very passionate about public service and mission work. She's traveled to Ecuador for 2 weeks in the summer of 2010, planting trees to raise money for village schools. Sally serves as a volunteer for the summer reading program in Thomasville's public library and volunteers in the extended day program at Thomasville Elementary School to assist young students with homework. Sally plans to pursue a college degree in either biomedical or chemical engineering. After college, she plans to attend graduate school to earn a PhD or a medical degree. Her ultimate goal is to one day work in the medical research field to develop cures for this nation's most troubling diseases. Sally is one of 14 youth in the state of Alabama who has received the Congressional Gold Medal of Service Award since its inception by Congress in 1979. The award provides a unique opportunity for young people to set and achieve personal challenging goals that build character and foster community service. Unlike many other awards, recipients do not win the Congressional Gold Medal of Service, they earn it. Sally earned this accolade by setting and achieving goals in 4 program areas: volunteer public service, personal development, physical fitness, and exploration. In her more than 800 hours of community service, she strengthened her commitment to public service and realized the power that one individual can make a difference in one's community and in this world. I had the great privilege of presenting the Congressional Gold Medal of Service Award to Sally 2 weeks ago on January 11, 2012, during a student assembly at Thomasville High School. I was impressed by Sally's poise, grace, and strength, her commitment to helping others. When asked about the award, Sally stated, "Receiving the Congressional Gold Medal of Service for Youth Award has been a tremendous honor for me. I am thankful for the love and support I've received while working towards this award, and I'm extremely humbled by this honor." Sally's principal, Mr. Kyle Ferguson, expressed the sentiments of her teachers, advisors, and mentors when he stated that Sally White is without a doubt one of the most driven, goal-oriented, and conscientious young people that I've ever encountered. She is certainly operating at a level far beyond her years. We have been honored to have her as a high school student for the past few years. Sally White is an excellent role model and a wonderful example of servant leadership. We should all aspire to work as hard as Sally for the good of others and for our own personal development. I want to applaud Sally's teachers, family members, friends, and the Thomasville community for helping to shape and nurture an outstanding student. On behalf of the 7th Congressional District, the state of Alabama, and this nation, we recognize and congratulate Sally White for receiving the Congressional Gold Medal of Service for Youth Award for her hard work, dedication, and commitment to community involvement. It is with great pride that I ask my colleagues in the House of Representatives to join me in honoring Sally White for her exemplary commitment to public service. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Duncan, for 5 minutes. Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All around the Hill today, you'll see members of Congress wearing a red button. 1,000 days. A reminder, 1,000 days since the United States Senate has passed a budget for the United States of America. 1,000 days acting irresponsibly. Now, I want to pause and tell you that last year on January the 8th, just 3 days after being sworn in as a new United States Congressman, we were informed of the tragic incident that happened in Arizona. And I want to let Gabby know that I'm going to be honored that she'll be on the floor with us today. Our prayers of my family and members of the South Carolina delegation and our state go up for her and her family and the folks of Arizona that she represents every day. And we'll continue to do that long after her service to this country. Mr. Speaker, this week is National School Choice Week. All across our country, students and families are rallying for National School Choice Week, a grassroots campaign dedicated to the idea that all students, regardless of background, should have the opportunity to choose the school that most effectively motivates them to learn. For too long, we have made increases in spending and standards from Washington as our focus. These have sadly strangled our parents' and teachers' ability to help our students succeed. Now, with that, I want to give a shout-out to the nation's teachers who have to deal every day with complying with the mandates that come from Washington, D.C., while they struggle to educate the children of our country. Instead of propelling them to success, the United States has fallen to 14th in the world in reading, 17th in science, 25th in math compared to other countries, according to the 2009 edition of the Program for International Student Assessment. Those numbers are astonishing. As proud Americans, we will not accept the consequences of failure, of letting our children fall behind the rest of the world. Parents are demanding results in education for their children, and Washington should listen to their message, which is simply, we know how to reform education in our states. Get Washington out of the way and watch us succeed. Education should be returned to the states, the local communities, and to parents, just where our founding fathers left it when they designed this great government. This is the reality we face. Our country, the United States of America, stormed the beaches of Normandy. We raised the flag over Iwo Jima. We fought for and won the freedoms of other nations all around the globe. We ventured into space and landed the human race on the moon. We inspired the collapse of the Berlin Wall. But before all of this, we invented the light bulb, the automobile, the television, the telephone, discovered art and the science of flying. Our inventions, though, are not as much the reason for our greatness as they are the results of it. Because at the very beginning, at our founding, we declared to the world this belief, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The truth in that declaration reminds us that our people would succeed and prosper. Our students will learn and achieve when we preserve the liberty of every parent, to choose the education environment that's best for their children. And if we do so, imagine how our children will lead the world through another century, marked by the rise of freedom and the innovation that freedom inspires. With that, Mr. Speaker, I want to end by echoing the words of Mr. Jones from earlier when he said, may God bless the men and women in uniform. May God bless their families. And may God continue to bless the United States of America. And with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Last week I came to the floor of the House to challenge the utilization of words because words matter. Candidates who are charging each other with a variety of sins decided to call President Barack Obama, who will give us the State of the Union, the food stamp president. For many of us who know our history, we might recall that in the 1940s and beyond, there were many who were on government cheese. In fact, many people I know today smile about that government cheese that they were given and peanut butter They are doctors and lawyers and leaders of this nation, teachers, people who are expanding the opportunity for others. This nation is a great country, and we're reminded that many who start from humble beginnings can ascend to the highest office or the barons and the leadership of corporate America. So the negative connotation of food stamp president is to denigrate those who receive it, rather than to suggest that there are opportunities in this nation that no other country can provide. So, Mr. Speaker, I rise today to talk about and look forward to the President's State of the Union as he speaks about income equality and challenges us as a nation to come together, to move forward on expanding jobs, such as the President's American Jobs Act. But I raise for thought the problem with how we will come to that point. I'm looking at an article that suggests that made in the USA may be a relic of the bygone. It uses one of our most famous, one of our most imitated companies in the world, Apple, which speaks to the genius of America. I will never step away from acknowledging that we are the inventive, the innovative, the genius, the creative population because we've been given freedom by our Constitution. But when you ask the question why the iPhone is manufactured elsewhere, and you hear comments about why the genius of this particular company has not translated into a number of jobs, why decisions have been made to move manufacturing overseas, and you ask the question, where is the corporate social responsibility, for example, and where is the generosity in terms of hiring American workers? Well, we know that the international economy is intertwined. Companies once felt an obligation to support American workers even when it wasn't the best financial choice. We call that American generosity. But I understand the bottom line. And so it is important that we begin to look at the items that the President is talking about, job skills training, and to find a way to restore the modern manufacturing that will bring more jobs to America. Why do these companies move overseas? In this article, it suggests because of the supply chains and the way factories can be put up and put down in these foreign countries. Now, you tell me why we can't do that. I believe we can. It is all about focus and logistics. And tonight, as the President expands on his Kansas speech about how we are a great nation, I'm looking for ways to end that income equality, for coming together and making sure that those who make much can have the ability to share those dollars, but yet still make a grand profit. I want to see us improve our supply chains and logistics. I want to see us get factories up and bring them down. We restored the American auto industry by commitment, dedication, and sacrifice. At last I heard, General Motors now is the #1 manufacturer of automobiles in the world. How did it come about? Because Democrats came together and joined around with a bipartisan support the idea that we can create jobs, we can manufacture jobs. Let me just say this. I will accept the challenge tonight that the President will offer, and I will realize that a food stamp family today, providing for their children, are presidents and CEOs and astronauts and inventors tomorrow. That's the kind of nation that we are. I'll say it always, I'll say it again. Food stamp is a denigrating term when you say food stamp president, as if the President does not want to create jobs. We're tired of the buzzwords and innuendo about certain groups, but I believe that we have a way of coming out of this. Mr. Speaker, now is the time. It is an urgency of now. It is a justice and equality that Martin Luther King spoke of and many other great leaders. It is this mosaic nation of people from all walks of life that have shown the world we're the greatest nation in the world. I'm looking forward to pursuing that in the 21st century, building jobs and saying, God bless America. I yield back.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Lundgren, for 5 minutes. Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. First, I would just say to the gentlelady who just spoke that I do not doubt that the President wishes to create jobs. The fact of the matter is he just doesn't know how. The record would suggest that. When I first came to this House, the year was 1979, January. We were in the midst of what history has shown us, as concluded, was a failed presidency. We had something called the Misery Index. We had unemployment rising. We had inflation rates around 20%. We had, by all gauges, a difficult time, a time that many people looked upon with despair, and many suggested that the issues were so large and the problems so great that no president could possibly deal with it, no Congress, and the American people could not. It was just prior to that time that I met a gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Gingrich, as we were both freshman members elected. And we began talking about the fact that our party had not been in the majority for well over a generation, that there seemed to be a lack of a vision for the future, and that there was an acceptance of mediocrity and failure and second-class status for America. And our belief was at that time that we could come together with a number of other members and try and at least give voice to a new idea, a new vision, a more positive vision for America. We worked together with other members and formed what was called the Conservative Opportunity Society because we thought that that was a positive vision for the future of America, consistent with Republican principles and, more importantly, consistent with and expressive of American principles. We thought it was an antidote to what we saw leading us at that time as the liberal welfare state. And I think history has shown that with the election of Ronald Reagan and the embracing of the Conservative Opportunity Society vision of America, that America could turn around. We are confronted with what I believe to be a failed presidency at the present time. We are confronted with questions and some great despair in families around America for the failure of an opportunity for jobs. And I would suggest that at this point in time, it is appropriate for those who have visions, those who are ready to challenge the conventional wisdom, those who believe that America's best days are ahead, not behind, to come to the fore. There are those who look at the faults of Newt Gingrich. I'd like to suggest that he was the one person that I know that had a vision in this House of how this House could be changed, how we, working as an institution, could work with a president to make changes, and ultimately how this side of the aisle could, for the first time in a generation, actually be the majority. Following his ascendancy to Speaker of the House, we actually had balanced budgets. We actually had some bringing down of some of the size of the federal government. We actually had some progress around the country. So I would say for those who look at the faults of others, let's look at their accomplishments. This is a time when it seems to me we ought to be serious about the future of America. We ought to be bold about the future of America. We ought to have some confidence in the greatness of America, the greatness of its people, not necessarily the greatness of its government. We need to have a good governmental structure that allows the greatness of the American people. There are some on the debate scene today, the presidential debate scene today, who are willing to challenge us with bold ideas. That has been done in the past and has proven successful. It seems to me we should not shrink from the future. We should embrace the future. We should, in fact, be leaders of the future. I am not one elected to this House to be satisfied that the future of America for my children, my grandchildren, is any less than what it was for me as a child growing up. I will not stand here and allow us to act in vain so that the sacrifices of my parents, some call the greatest generation, I say one of the greatest generations, will have been in vain. They worked hard. They accepted the challenges of the future with an innate confidence in the goodness of the American people, the capabilities of the American people, and yes, the common sense of the American people. My hope is that we go forward in this year. Those of us who seek office for both the House, the Senate, and the presidency will accept that mantle of leadership that has been cast upon us from those in the past.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to express my concern that Republicans are attempting to penalize unemployed American citizens who do not have a high school diploma. Last month, House Republicans included a provision in the payroll tax cut bill, which is presently in conference, to establish an educational requirement for recipients of benefits. The provision, Mr. Speaker, would require recipients of unemployment benefits to have at least a high school diploma or GED or be enrolled in classes to obtain such a degree. This requirement, Mr. Speaker, would affect an estimated 248,000 workers in the first 3 months of enactment and disproportionately affect older workers, forcing certain unemployment recipients to either enroll in adult education programs or forego the benefits they need to support their families. This is a disgrace. In 2010, 500,000 workers aged 50 or over who received unemployment insurance lacked a high school diploma. For most of these individuals who have worked more than 30 long years, returning to high school makes very little sense. They are the bricklayers and the carpenters and sanitation workers and housekeepers in our communities. In the case of workers under the age of 50, adult education might be useful, but is largely unattainable. Currently, state and local adult education programs do not have the capacity, we know that, do not have the capacity to meet this demand. Waiting lists for these programs are prolific and certain to worsen due to a 20% decline over the past decade in federal funding for adult education programs and $1 billion in cuts to job training programs in fiscal year 2011. Creating an educational mandate as a condition of eligibility to receive unemployment insurance benefits, Mr. Speaker, is punitive. It's misguided. It's egregious, even by current Republican standards. While there are certainly benefits to receiving at least a high school education, establishing a blanket policy that denies unemployment benefits to low-skilled workers who have lost their jobs due to no fault of their own without ensuring they have unrestricted access to educational opportunities sets up hundreds of thousands of Americans to fail. It seems incredibly cynical to require participation in adult education and job training as a condition of receiving unemployment benefits while simultaneously eliminating meaningful federal support for these programs. Mr. Speaker, it is unconscionable to put additional strings on this crucial relief that do nothing to address the real causes of the current unemployment crisis. It is a difficult time to be unemployed in America. It is a difficult time to be unemployed in America, but House Republicans seem determined to make it even more difficult. I urge my colleagues to join me and stand up against this education mandate and fight for policies that can actually help bring the unemployment crisis to resolve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fitzpatrick, for 5 minutes. Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Starting January 29th of this year, Catholic schools across the country will initiate their annual observance of Catholic Schools Week. The theme for this year is Catholic Schools, Faith, Academics, Service. The 2012 theme emphasizes the principles of Catholic school education, which families in my district and across the country highly value. The theme focuses on 3 priorities that are distinct to Catholic schools. Children are taught faith, not just the basics of Christianity, but how to have a relationship with their God. Academics, in which Catholic schools are held to very high standards. Earlier this year, I was proud to recognize the Nativity of Our Lord Catholic School in Warminster, Pennsylvania, for receiving the 2011 National Blue Ribbon of Excellence Award. Finally, the 3rd principle in the 2012 theme is service, the giving of one's time and effort to help others. It is taught both as an expression of faith, but also of good citizenship. Schools typically celebrate Catholic Schools Week with Mass, open houses, and activities for students, families, parishioners, and the community at large. In addition to this year's list of activities, some schools in my district will host events welcoming families from schools with which they will be merging. While the Archdiocese of Philadelphia contemplates their plans for continuing to provide students with a rigorous academic curriculum in concert with spiritual values, families and parishioners can reflect upon the three principles of Catholic Schools Week: faith, academics, service, not simply as a theme, but also as a guide for their future decisions. Mr. Speaker, Catholic Schools Week is truly a time to demonstrate the intangible value of Catholic education. I'm extremely grateful for the hard work and dedication of the administrators, faculty, students, and parents who've created an environment fostering academic excellence, spirituality, and service. I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Ms. Lee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the founder of the Congressional Out of Poverty Caucus, I rise again today to remind this body about the crisis of poverty in America, which really should prick the conscience of every Democrat and Republican. As we begin to consider legislation for this year and budgets for the fiscal year 2013, we must do more to help millions of Americans living in poverty. We must do more for the millions of Americans who are looking very hard for a job and working hard every day to move up the ladder of opportunity, really trying to remove these very difficult barriers. We must not balance our budgets on the backs of the most vulnerable, the poor, and low-income individuals. And we cannot allow any budget cuts or authorize new spending on programs that will increase poverty or increase income inequality in America. We also must commit to taking bold steps to reducing the devastating impact of poverty in America, and that is by creating jobs. It's inexcusable and immoral to fail to take the strongest possible action to bring immediate help to those Americans in need. We cannot continue down the path that leads to increasing poverty, inequality, and income disparities, which focus more and more wealth in the hands of the few and leaves millions of Americans behind. With nearly 50 million Americans in poverty and half of all Americans in low-income households, we cannot wait. We must act now. Mr. Speaker, poverty doesn't just hurt families and the children who grow up in families trapped by poverty, but it costs our nation hundreds of billions of dollars in lost productivity and slows the nation's economic growth. We must act to strengthen funding for programs that not only prevent hunger, homelessness, crime, and maintain access to education, but we almost must create initiatives to demand goods and services which boost our economy. That means that small businesses across America need customers, and they need customers right now. And so we must extend the expiring unemployment benefits. We can't abandon the millions of job seekers before they find a good job. We should also immediately add an additional 14 weeks of Tier 1 unemployment benefits for the millions of Americans who have completely exhausted their benefits after 99 weeks. Far too many Americans have exhausted all of their unemployment benefits and are still unable to work. We must not abandon these 99ers. To achieve these ends, we must ensure that we protect the efficient and effective programs we already have in place and provide strong investments that spur immediate job growth. And we have the resources to do this if we commit ourselves to increasing fairness in taxation to ensure that the wealthiest Americans pay their fair share and enact a reasonable tax code that includes financial transactions which will not only raise vital revenue but set some limits to the wild, out-of-control speculation and vulture capitalism that nearly brought down this entire economy. Also, we must take a bold approach in how we allocate the large savings from our defense budgets as we bring our troops home from abroad. I'm confident that the President will speak to the moral and economic crises of income inequality and will not forget the long-term unemployed, the poor, our seniors, our students, and the middle class in his State of the Union speech tonight. I hope that Republicans and Democrats in this body take heed and tomorrow pass the American Jobs Act for the good of the country. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Ms. Woolsey, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, tonight, when the President of the United States addresses our nation from this chamber, we'll hear some good news on the national security front. The end of the Iraq War, for example, is an impressive accomplishment, one that wouldn't have happened if bold progressives hadn't called for our troops to be brought home way back in 2005. I'm also pleased the President's leadership will make it possible for our military strategic review to call for significant reductions in defense spending. But on both of these fronts, ending our current wars and long-range national security strategy, I'm hoping for proposals that are bigger and bolder than what we've heard to this point. Bottom line, Mr. Speaker, we need to end the war in Afghanistan, and we need to end it now, not 2014, not at whatever other later date the military brass decides is appropriate. After nearly 1,900 American deaths and more than 10 years of bloodshed and mayhem, we owe it to our troops and to their families, as well as American taxpayers, to bring them home. This war is not just a moral disgrace, not just a humanitarian disaster, Mr. Speaker. It's a strategic failure. We're spending at least $10 billion every month to prop up a regime in Afghanistan that is ineffective on its best day and downright corrupt on its worst. Afghanistan continues to be racked by poverty and violence, and my belief is that by continuing to have military boots on the ground, we're encouraging more animosity towards the United States, giving the Taliban a recruitment tool and thus undermining our security. Mr. Speaker, we need a new security program. We need a new security paradigm, an entirely fresh way of thinking about how to keep our nation safe. Won't we make more friends and win more hearts and minds if we extend a hand of friendship to the rest of the world instead of rattling the saber at the first sign of trouble? Actually, that's the heart of my smart security platform. Why are we spending pennies on humanitarian aid for every dollar we're spending on weapons and welfare and warfare? Instead of a military surge, we need a civilian surge, one that lifts people out of poverty, rebuilds infrastructure, promotes education, especially for women and girls, and combats malnutrition and global health problems around the world. Smart security is a renewed commitment to diplomacy, multilateralism, and peaceful conflict resolution. It would support a dramatic downsizing of the military-industrial complex. Believe it or not, the Pentagon consumes 56% of discretionary spending, with a budget bigger in real dollars than it was at the height of the Soviet threat. And with smart security, we can reverse that. Tonight, I'm told, the President will sound the theme of an America built to last. But no nation, Mr. Speaker, that exists in a state of semi-permanent warfare can be built to last. I worry about how we can be built to last when we have enough nuclear warheads to blow the world to smithereens many times over. Now is the time, Mr. Speaker. Our common humanity compels us to bring the troops home from Afghanistan and implement a smart security agenda. Now is the time. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Lewis, for 5 minutes.
Mr. House, for 5 minutes to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize and celebrate the life of Ed Jenkins, a fellow Georgian, a dedicated public servant, and a good friend. I had the honor of serving on the Ways and Means Committee alongside Congressman Jenkins. Born in the small town of Jasper, Georgia, Congressman Jenkins would often describe himself as a country lawyer. But he was a country lawyer with an extensive knowledge of the tax system. He was knowledgeable. He was very informed. He was an advocate for the people and industries of Georgia. He was a champion of the South textile industry and a fierce protector of the local economy. Although often soft-spoken, Ed Jenkins bravely pressed for the facts of the Iran country affair. He believed the American people deserved to hear the truth, and he was not afraid to speak out. He was not afraid to speak up. He was thoughtful, considered, a brave negotiator, and an unbelievable, just excellent colleague. When I first came to Congress, he was so helpful and so caring. I learned so much from him. He was a good man, a decent human being. I never heard him say a mean thing about anyone. I only wish we had more members of Congress on both sides of the aisle with not just his demeanor, but with the pride he took in this institution, in this Congress. He was very proud to be a member of Congress and proud to be a member of the Ways and Means Committee. And that pride made him a powerful leader. I can remember over the years, each time the Ways and Means Committee came together for a reunion, he would always show up long after he retired from the Congress. I was so sad to hear of his passing and would like to express my deepest sympathy to his wife, Jo, his daughter, Janice and Amy, and his entire family. As a nation, we greatly benefited from his service. As a colleague, I learned so much from his example and his friendship. He will be deeply missed by the people of Georgia, the people of this nation. He made a lasting contribution to our country, and we must never, ever forget this good and great man. And with that, Mr. Speaker,